Now we're going to talk about why the money market equilibrates at a particular nominal interest rate. But in order to do that, we have to think about the relationship between bond rate, interest rates, and bond prices, and how people act and react to that. Bond prices and interest rates are inversely related. Okay? In other words, if bond prices rise, this means interest rates, nominal or real, fall, and vice versa. Bond prices fall, interest rates rise. Okay? Now, why is that? Because most bonds have a fixed amount that they pay at maturity. Okay? So if you buy a 1-year bond, what you're actually going to get, okay, so if you buy a 1-year bond, that say it's a $1,000 bond, okay? The way bonds work or most bonds, not all bonds, but the way most bonds work is that in a year's time, you'll get $1,000 back, okay? Now, that's $1,000 that includes the interest on the bond. So this is $1,000 1 year from now, okay? That includes the interest rate on the bond. So what does that mean? Well, that means I had to have spent less than $1,000 when I purchased the bond today. So assume that I purchased the bond for $900 today. Okay, and that is today. Okay. The difference is the interest, okay? So I made $100 in interest on this, and whatever that rate is, just take 100 divided by 90, it's whatever it is, a little bit better than 10%, I guess. I want to say, what is that, 12% or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't matter, okay? So I made $100 interest on that bond. So this is the way most bonds work. I buy it today for $900. A year from now, I get $1,000 back because that's the face value of the bond. Okay, now having said that, you can easily see then how bond prices and interest rates are inversely related. Because if the difference is the interest on the bond, if the bond price rises, say instead of buying it for $900, I buy it for $950. Well, then in a year's time, I only made $50 interest on that bond, okay? Which means the interest rate on the bond is lower. The interest that the bond paid is lower, okay? So, and imagine, however, I only paid $850 for this bond today, okay? So now I made $150 interest when this bond matures, and of course the rate of return on that bond has increased. So the price has fallen, the rate, the interest that I earn is greater, so the rate of return is greater, okay? So this is why bond prices and interest rates are related. Typically, bonds pay a face value at maturity, but when you actually buy the bond, you buy it for less than what it matures at, okay? And that's why bond prices and interest rates are inversely related. Now, what does this mean for the money market? Well, let me draw the money market over here because I'm going to bring another graph in a little bit, okay? So here's our money market. There's money supply, there's money demand. Okay, this is the equilibrating nominal interest rate. So the question is, then why does the money market equilibrate at R star? Well, let's look at an interest rate of R prime. Okay, so the money market is out of equilibrium. The interest rate is relatively high. Okay, now what does that mean? If the interest rate's relatively high, as we just saw, bond prices are relatively low. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That means that face value spread on that bond is high. Okay? So you want to go ahead and not consume a lot of cash, but invest in bonds because the spread is larger, okay? Now, we see this sort of same thing play out back in the loanable funds market, right? We can actually connect these two graphs, even though one has the real interest rate and the other the nominal rate on the vertical axis. So this is the demand for loanable funds. This is the supply for loanable funds. So assume now that the interest rate is above equilibrium. Okay, assume the real rate is above equilibrium. Okay, well, what does this mean? Well, at a high real interest rate, people want to save more. Quantity of saving goes up. It's the same thing here. How do people save, or some people anyway? Well, they buy bonds. If the real rate is high, quantity of saving rises, some of those people aren't going to be putting cash in the bank. They're going to be buying bonds. Okay? So you can connect the two graphs effectively. And obviously, if there's a lot of saving going on out there, interest rates will get pushed down. Over here, with regard to the bond market, if bond prices are low, meaning that interest rates are high, as people start to buy bonds, the demand for bonds increases. This pushes the price of bonds back up. Okay, this pushes the price of bonds back up, which then brings the interest rate down. Now, let's look at the flip side of this. So assume the interest rate is relatively low, okay? Well, if we look at the loanable funds market, that would be an instance like that, okay? Now, what does this mean? Well, at a relatively low real rate, people want to save less. We flip over here to the money market. At a relatively low rate, that means bond prices are really high. That means the spread between the price of the bond and the face value of the bond is much smaller. That's less attractive to people to buy bonds. So they're going to hold more cash in their pockets, okay? As people start to shift away from bonds and sell their bonds and shift toward cash, well, then the demand for bonds falls. This pushes the price of bonds down and the interest rate on bonds back up, okay? Now, as this interest rate rises, of course, the quantity supplied of loanable funds will increase. Why? Because as this interest rate rises, bond prices are falling again, makes bond buying more attractive, okay? And that's why you get an increase in the quantity supplied of loanable funds over here. But that's how the money market plays out, and that's why the money market equilibrates at a nominal interest rate of R star. Has everything to do with the bond market. Again, when interest rates are high, bond prices are low. That means the spread between what you buy the bond for and its face value at maturity is large. So you want to buy bonds. You want to hold less cash. If interest rates are low, that means bond prices are high. That means that spread between your purchase what you purchased the bond for and its face value at maturity is small. Bonds are less attractive. You're willing to hold more cash. As you shift over to cash, demand for bonds falls. This pushes the price of bonds down and increases the interest rate back up toward equilibrium.